Good evening and good whatever it is for people on the stream. I'm Des, and I'm going to talk about this agentic era we're all heading into. So I'm going to open with just a quote from the CEO of DeepMind, Demis, who said, "Agents will be the most transformative technology since perhaps electricity." And I think that's both crazy and directionally correct. And I think it is this world we're headed for. And within the crowd here, we have folks from leading CS teams, we have folks who are leading product teams, we have folks who are leading startups. And hopefully, as we talk through this, there'll be something in it for each of you. Demis is not the only person to have a crazy, wide-eyed hype quote. In fact, everyone who's anyone in tech has something batshit to say about how agents are going to happen to us all. And there is no shortage of them, including even me. I'm going to say something which is, can we just chill with the hype speak and actually say something practical about what's actually happening? And what's happening is, we're in this adapt or die moment. This AI agent era is happening now. It's not if it's happening, it is happening. It's not when is it happening, it's happening now. You can, in the words of Thanos, you can dread it, you can run from it, but agents are coming all the same. And a while ago, internally, I gave a talk where I was saying, some of our team respond to optimism and positivity and think of how great it could be, and other folks respond to fear and drama and think of how bad it could get. And I've got something for both of them, right? If you nail this transition, you'll be a category leader, you'll shoot to millions of revenue or hundreds of millions of revenue, you'll be on the front page of Forbes, you'll raise every round you ever want. So that's all the good news. The great part is you don't have a choice, because if you fail, you die. And that's genuinely what we're headed towards here. So practically speaking, we're sitting here, or I'm standing, on May 21st. What should we actually be doing? And the answer is we should be learning about what agents are, what they do, what they can be, and how you should adopt them. If we're thinking about building them, or if our company's thinking about transitioning to this agentic era, how do you do about it? How do you do it? You have to learn, all of you have to learn how to evaluate an agent, how to understand if it's any good. Is it trying to do too much? Is it doing too little, so it's not worth adopting? And ultimately, what we'll be doing a lot over the next few years is learning how to build agents, buy agents, use agents, control agents, etc. And that's really what we'll cover. So this is the sort of 5 sections I'll go through. And we'll start with for any agent, whether you're buying it or building it, how ambitious should you be? What's the most you think you can do? You can simply look for an agent that helps somebody do their job, and that's an augmentation play. We've seen things like this in the form of a copilot, right? You can say, hey, let's try and tackle a workflow entirely, but just one workflow. There's lots of workflows out there, we'll just do one of them. Or you can say, let's try and displace an entire team. Now, obviously, the job here is small, it's probably low risk, but probably low reward. And over and high and to the right is extremely difficult to do, but if you do it, you could be valued at 9 billion, 15 billion. The numbers just seem to lose all meaning at this point, but the values there are insane, right? But it's not that easy, right? The hard part is to work out what's the right size agent. Do you want to buy the thing that just helps you do a bit of code, or do you want to buy the thing that builds an app entirely for you, right? There's a sort of sense of what is the right amount of thing to bite off. So let's just take a simple agent. Let's say something that's going to help you run your meetings. There are steps in running meetings, right? You schedule it, you share it, you meet, you record, you transcribe, and you distribute the tasks, and then you check in again, right? You could imagine one agent saying, I'm going to do all this for you. Great. Or you could imagine an agent saying, I'm going to do a subset. And there's a lot you have to think about here. For starters, whose toes are you stepping on? There are already plenty of products out there that do all of this. And you have to work out which of these do I integrate with, and which of these am I going to bulldoze my way over? Or if you're buying an agent, which of these do I have to throw away? If you say, oh, and we're also going to be where you do the communication, I'm like, okay, does that mean I'm canceling Slack? That's going to be difficult. So it's not as simple as saying, let's do everything, because it makes it a very complicated play. And then separately, it's worth saying, all these tools are fighting with each other anyway, right? Everyone is trying to do a bit more. There is this, AI is this idea of a convergent force. It's strategically aggressive. It wants to do more and more stuff in any workflow. It always thinks, because previously, the reason these tools are separate is because they need different UI, different users, different price points. AI doesn't give a shit. AI is just I'll do it all. I'm brilliant. I'm genius. But convergence can work against you too. You can converge too much if you like. We've all done that, right? Here's a quote from Tim Cook, of all people, who said, you can converge a toaster and a refrigerator because they're both kitchen appliances, but the end result will be a bit weird. And there's obviously something, by the way, about toasters in Apple, because Steve Jobs had previously said convergence means your television is going to make you toast because they're both domestic appliances. And again, you get this sort of weird shit, right? But the real question you have to ask, whether you're building or buying an agent, is where do you draw the line? How much product is too much? How much is too little? There's a Goldilocks type problem here for you, right? The general guidance I would say is if you're bumping into a totally different buyer or owner of the product internally, that's usually a good sign you should draw the line. Otherwise, you now have to teach the head of sales and the head of support and the head of marketing all to buy your product. That's 3 different brands, that's 3 different price points, 3 different everything. Really complicated. Different levels of data access integrations. If you've got a different brand required, like the thing that's cool with salespeople might not be cool with product nerds or whatever. And then generally, if you're just bumping into a really popular product that everyone in your company already loves, and you're going to be like, buy this new thing and rip out your favorite thing, it's not going to work. People like certain tools. They're like, most people like Slack and tools like that, or at least they used to. So the next thing you have to work out is, if you are saying, right, we're going to do this general job, you have to understand, this is where most companies go wrong. They don't actually understand the job that they're replacing. They think they do. They think they've got they have the sort of aesthetic sense of what it roughly looks like. But if you don't understand a job, you can't do it, right? One of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain is the whole, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that's not true. And I think that's a thing where I see most software companies fail, is that they think they can perfectly replicate something, and they can, but it's not a thing that actually happens in the real world. So if you don't fully understand it, you have to research and solve that problem first. We see this all the time in CS, right? A classic thing whenever I play with somebody else's effort at a CS agent, or somebody who's like, oh, I could have built that in a weekend. They write a product that assumes that customer support looks like this. I would like to reset my password, please. Or my order, and I'm going to helpfully include the order number, it was placed over, I'm going to include the time frame, right? This is like the fantasy of CS, right? Like, because you look at this and you're like, sure, I can analyze all that and do all the right stuff. That's not a problem. The reality of CS, as you all well know, and we live all the time, is much more like this. This is broken, sup? Or like, I was talking to Dave earlier. Can you get Dave? Like this is the stuff that you actually deal with. So agentify this, right? This is an easy problem. It's just not a real one, right? This is the actual problem. And similarly, people say, oh, well, that's okay. We're just going to ingest all the support policy documents. That's easy. I'm like, cool. Have you seen support policy documents? Well, I imagine that they look like this. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. That's really convenient. They have a really nice Notion page that outlines their entire support policy document. If you actually work with CS teams, what you get is something more like this. Ask Dave. Dave knows, right? Like, that's the reality of like what you're dealing with here. But the real world is really messy, and that's where your agent has to succeed, right? So what does a CS job actually look like? What are you trying to agentify? Well, it's actually complicated. It's you chat back and forth until you get a question that is some way answerable. You find the abstract version of the question. You offer sympathy or empathy where it makes sense. Then you do investigation, you troubleshoot, then you summarize at the end, you escalate if you need to. These are all the different skills you have, which is why when people ask, like, what are the internals of Fin, it's like, and this is the whole thing that kills me about this thin wrapper thing of like, oh, you just ping it all to OpenAI and it does everything. Wrong, like the actual internals are really, really complicated. This is like a marketing prepared simplification that's probably 8 times too simple, but there's so much to be done to replicate the actual talent that a human support rep has to actually navigate a difficult conversation. Until you understand this, you build really simple things, and again, you have a beautifully simple product for a problem that does not exist. And that is just the challenge where so many of these things fail. The other thing you have to understand is, like AI, like this generation of AI is obviously new, and it's obviously brilliant, but automation is not new, right? Automation has been around, especially in customer support, forever. So you have to understand, why did the previous stuff fail, right? History is a cheap and forgiving teacher. You can look back and be like, why was the first generation of chatbots so awful, right? And you can learn from that and work out, well, how do we make it better from there, okay? Almost everything you're going to try and automate, no matter what domain you try and go into, sales, marketing, support, B2C, consumer, prosumer, someone's tried to do it before, and they tried to do it with the shitter eras of AI, and they failed. And you have to understand why, because you don't want to be just like, well, generative AI is going to help, because you'll just fail with sparkles attached. It's not the same thing. Previous AI CS, AI customer service, failed because of the burden of training. You had to do all this derpy, yes, that's an example, no, that's an example, yes, all that sort of stuff was overhead that people weren't willing to do. It was difficult to maintain the rule sets. I'll show you an example. The data is incredibly unstructured, and that's a mess as well. And then like also the searching capabilities, what we call RAG, retrieval augmented generation, were actually pretty limited in that era. But just to cast your mind back, the previous bots were so annoying. Like, you couldn't change your mind. So if you said, oh, I want a pump of vanilla, I changed my mind. Oh, don't understand, start over. That was the normal experience. And the geniuses of the day relied on like all this crazy conversational mapping analysis. And like, that was like literally how you had to like manage and sort of be like, right, now I think I can handle a customer changing their mind. In reality, humans deal with this all the time. The other thing we saw a lot of is like these like sort of smart replies where you'd be like, hey, I just got scammed. Great! Because it turns out it's actually tricky to work out what's the right thing to say all the time. And then you have other things like, hi, it's like, I don't understand, hi, you should say hello. And you're like, hi is the same thing as hello, but okay. But this is like this is why the previous generation failed, but it's also a good reminder like that, like these things are like pretty important to get right. So you have to think when you're trying to shrink and then trying to perfect, you have to start with something small that definitely works, but you have to like think about that a lot and really scope it down. So a thing people talk about a lot is how agentic it can be, which basically means how much can it act independently, how much like freedom do you give it. Businesses like the idea of agentic because it's like it can handle everything, but they also love predictability, as in I know what it's going to do. And you have this very obvious trade-off. The way this plays out in customer service is you have flowcharts, which are super predictable, but they're annoying as hell to manage. And you've got like agents that might go rogue. Can I have a refund? Why not, right? Ideally, what you want is something that combines the best of both. You want the predictability, but you also want the agentic capabilities. And that's what we've been shooting for with Fin Tasks. But it's just a quick reminder that like, being fully agentic is not actually what people want. They want an agent they can control to some degree. We actually talk about this a lot. In fact, we published a really nice research paper on this we have an AI research blog, by the way. It's at fin.ai/research, where we actually talk about the trade-off between agency, how much freedom do you give, control, how much can you guardrail it and make sure it does only things you want it to do, and then reliability, how much will it reliably do the things you ask it to do. It's not easy. The temptation is always to like be like, I want all of these things, but every one of them bumps into every other one of them. I do want to say, I'd nearly sell you off the idea of agents if I kept going on like this, right? I just want to point out one little thing that's slightly uncomfortable. There's a different type of agent that is also can be unreliable, hard to control, and perhaps low agency. Humans, right? Humans can be pretty low agency, where they don't do anything unless you tell them to do it. Humans can be extremely unreliable, right? We all have these teammates who one day they're a genius and the following day they just don't give a shit, right? And we have to deal with both versions. And humans can be extremely uncontrollable, even if they are good, right? Like Maverick from Top Gun or whatever, right? Like you know it's going to be good when it shows up. And like this is the challenge that we wrestle with. It's worth saying reliability in general is actually a new thing that we have to wrestle with, right? In our old world, if you're building like project management software, you'd be like, well, if you click the add project button, 7 times out of 10 it's going to add a project. No, that made no sense. Everything just worked before. Reliability is an actual thing. So if we take, in this era of AI, reliability really matters because unreliability kind of compounds. So if you take something like, this is a simple expense tracking agent, right? It's got to detect the expense, scan the receipt, find the categories, allocate, blah, 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 right? And then, hey, the detecting expense, that's 99% reliable. That's got to be good enough, right? Sounds good enough. But the challenge is, if you try to be the everything agent that just kind of nails the entire workflow from like A to Z or soup to nuts or whatever metaphor you want, the challenge is that irreliability, or whatever the word is, compounds. And this flow is actually, if you just multiply out the probabilities, it's only 85% reliable. Now, that might sound fine, but what if you're trying to do this 1,000 times a day? Who wants to deal with 150 misfiled expenses every day? That's not very agentic and useful. So you really have to scope these problems down to make sure you can execute them really well. This is so much of what we spend our time thinking about. The quality of the product is so important. You're replacing humans. It is not easy, right? It's extremely hard to get this stuff right. There's a huge multi-year, multi-million-dollar difference between something that kind of works and something that always works. It's a big, big thing. And when you're buying agents, this is what you have to test for. Yeah. Like the thin wrapper crowd, the people who think that they can build one of your products in a weekend crowd, they're only thinking about how quick is it to demo a version that works once so you can record a quick screencast and try and raise some money or whatever. That's a very easy problem. Try putting 1 million conversations or 1 million expenses or 1 million projects through it. That's a very hard problem. And so you see, you can make a lot of progress very quickly, but to actually get to general availability could take a long time, possibly never, just depending on how you've scoped your problem. And this idea of good enough is something people have to think about a lot. Like Everyone loves to dream big until they see the price tag, what it takes to actually build these things. It's extremely, extremely difficult. And I would say, like, a thing I see a lot of companies try and do is scope down they'll sort of say, hey, because it's pretty hard to get this really reliable, I'm just going to make it a little bit of a nice to have optional side tool. That's a bit of a sleight of hand, but it doesn't work because ultimately, if your product can't be trusted, it's just not useful, full stop. It's just like if you can't trust the output from it, people just don't use it. It's as simple as that. So really, there's a point here about scoping your product to do something that's really valuable, really reliably, or at least to match the reliability of what's currently out there. Otherwise, you will not succeed. And then similarly, if you're out there buying agents, whether it's whatever your business function you represent is, coding agents, design agents, you name it, just make sure that you pay attention a lot to this, right? Can you actually rely on this thing? So there's another choice you have to make, which is just about agent architecture. And generally, like, for all we say, an agent's just really three things. It's like a model, it's a set of tools, and it's a set of instructions. The model is like your underlying LLM. Your instructions are what are you actually saying to it? Like, you are a customer support agent, or you are a visual designer, or you're an engineer. And then the tools is what permission or what freedom are you giving it? Can it write in Slack? Can it ship code? Can it create designs? Can it publish? You have to give it as much freedom as it needs to do the job, but not so much that you actually strangle it or make it really dangerous to adopt. So your trade-offs when you're picking how you're going to build these things is all about what underlying model do you want to have? Is it going to be the fast one or the very, very accurate one? What's your trade-off between cost, speed, reliability? You have to make smart choices there. Your instruction set, how specific can you be to drive the reliability high while still serving the requirements of all of your target market, right? If you get too specific, you'll get a great agent for a very specific vertical or something like that. You have to really make sure that you're actually serving your market. And then lastly, it's tempting to say, give it access to everything, but the challenge there is adoption is a nightmare, and also the agent can kind of get confused. It's usually at that point of confusion that you'll move from like a single agent model where you've basically just got like an agent who might have like MCP and prompts and all sorts of stuff and to produce an output, like it's just kind of a linear in-out type thing, to like a multi-agent model where you might say have something like a manager who's kind of in charge of working out what we have to do and farms out tasks to various different sub-agents. These are all valid approaches. Obviously, this one's simple, easy to test, easy to play with. This one's slightly harder. But you have to understand the complexity of what it is you're trying to do to architect your product the right way. And similarly, when you're buying, you have to make sure that the underlying sort of models aren't appallingly simplistic, but have enough power to actually replicate what you're trying to do. The last piece I'll finish on is just launching. So again, whether you're launching something you built yourself or whether you're launching when you bought. Launch is just the beginning in AI. That's like the biggest change. You'll realize, fine, it might work. The new version of works on my machine is like it worked on my evaluation, right? Like meaning like you've perfected this thing that works on a load of test data, but when you put it into wild, it absolutely bombs, right? Reality bats last. So like the only thing that actually matters is when this is live, what actually happened. I used to say like the good PMs, like a good PM obsesses about shipping, a great one obsesses about the product being used, and the best ones obsess about impact. They obsess about ongoing engagement. In this era of AI, there's an extra concern that's way more important, which is, does the thing actually work? You have to actually know, does it actually work? Is Finn actually answering questions? Is Lovable actually shipping apps? You have to care about these things a lot. And one of the things we've been building, this is the thinking that Paul walked through earlier, is this idea of an optimization engine. People need to know, what is the agent doing for me? Can I get it to do more? And how do we get it to be better, right? How do we get it to do it better? And this is the same challenge you have if you manage somebody, by the way. It's like, what are you doing? Can you do more? Can you do better? This is like, so there is still a category of software that we have to build, which is everything around the agent. This is the analyze, train, test, deploy loop. So for us, it was about an optimization engine, which forced us to answer questions like, well, who actually owns the agent when we go live? That's a really important question. In all of your companies, who owns it? Like if you've bought one of like Cursor, Devon, Lovable, et cetera, who in your company owns that and makes sure it's doing good work, right? What metrics make sense for the product? How do you know it's doing good work? What does the organization look like once all the work is now getting done by AI? And how do you explain all of this? So who owns the agent? Ultimately, you need to help your customers solve this problem. These are all different job titles that we've seen of the Finn owner in a company. As you can see, there's a lot of variation here, but we need to actually craft the idea of what is an AI support leader and who is an AI operations leader and what do they own. And what are the new metrics when your product is being deployed? So first response time makes no sense when it's 0 seconds, right? Because the agent doesn't even type, right? Average handling time makes no sense. Rep productivity doesn't make sense. So all the old metrics kind of fade away, and you have to create the new metrics. And that's where, for example, that's the thinking behind the CX score, but also you care about resolution rate and involvement rate and all this other stuff. So you have to actually think about the metrics that the business is managed to. What's the organizational impact? So if the old way of staffing a support team was like different teams, different leads, split by country, split by time zone, split by language, split by all of these things, all of that goes away. So what does the org look like after all of that? And maybe it's like that there's now a support specialist who mostly deal with escalations, but you do need people who now own the agent and who are actually responsible for tuning the agent, getting a great outcome from the agent. When you're launching a new product like we do today, who's out there tuning the agent so it can answer all the questions? And then lastly, how do you explain all this shit, right? Like this is not an easy thing to do. Like it's you move to this new world, but it's not like a single on button and you're done. You actually have to put a lot of work into teaching your customers, teaching your own orgs. What does this transformation look like, right? And we've done so much of this, and we'll be continuing to do so much more. Arguably, me being on stage right now is actually just a part of it. So I'll wrap up on this. If you're out there building an agent, I would say be as ambitious as you can, but no more, right? If the thing doesn't work, throw it in the bin. There's no points for an unreliable product. Respect the job. Make sure that what you're doing is definitely valuable, but also definitely doable. Don't chase shadows or chase a mirage of an AI agent. You have to also build workflows around the agent, internally or in your own product. You have to make sure there's a way to make it better and make it work. And you have to also explain that transformation to everyone around you, including your customers if you're selling to them. If you're buying or evaluating, look for credible deployments at scale. Like anyone can get a sexy screencast. That's the easy bit. The question is, can this thing work in the wild with like millions of incidents thrown through it? Compare the agent with reality, by the way. Don't compare it with perfection. Reality is what's currently happening. Can you outperform that? That's the thing you're competing with. You're not competing with some notional God agent, right? You're competing with like a normal human doing the job, and that's your actual frame of comparison. Build the workflows around you. Understand the organizational transformation that you have to go through. So if you are going to adopt one of these products, make sure you know what has to happen internally for it to be a success. And lastly, just make sure that you can maintain your agent over time as well. I'll just wrap by saying two things. This is probably the most exciting and scariest time in software. It's certainly in my career. I think we're kind of on the precipice of crazy, wonderful times. There's a lot going on, but within your companies and then in terms of what's happening to every software business, every software product that's out there, they all are going to go through an agentification. Sorry for all the words. And I hope this talk has been in some way useful in sort of informing your path as you get there. And with that, I'll finish and I'll hand over to Rad, who's going to lead a panel with Consensus and Lovable. Thank you very much.